I'm Kevin Mims with the Invading Sea, a Florida-wide media collaborative that reports on climate change in the state. As part of that effort, we've started The Business of Climate Change, a weekly interview with businessmen and women whose companies are either affected by the warming climate or address climate challenges. Today's conversation is with Elizabeth Fata Carpenter, managing attorney with the Everglades Law Center. Elizabeth focuses her practice on greater Everglades restoration issues, including implementation of the Comprehensive Everglades Restoration Plan and environmental issues in South Florida impacting communities and the natural and built environments. Elizabeth, thanks for talking with us today.
Absolutely, Kevin. Thanks for having me.
Elizabeth, first, can you talk about some of the climate-related changes you've seen over the years in your area of Miami-Dade County?
Yes, absolutely. I think that the most obvious thing that kind of comes to everybody's mind initially is flooding. And we've all seen those images of Miami-Dade streets underwater and, the octopus in the parking garage, I think most of us are familiar with. And that really, most of those pictures are from Miami Beach, but that's really an issue all throughout Miami-Dade County, including where I live in the village of El Portal. The village of El Portal is kind of on the northern end of Miami-Dade County, just north of the city of Miami. And in the last few years, we're definitely seeing an increase in flooding events, an increase in both the severity of those events, as well as the frequency. And we're also seeing a real change in water quality. We're seeing seagrass die-offs in Biscayne Bay, manatee deaths, and last year, about 1 year ago, I guess, August of 2020, we had a significant fish kill in the bay as well. So those events are becoming more frequent. We're also seeing septic tank failures, which are contributing to the water quality issues and the flooding problems. And so as a result of all these things that we're seeing happening around our community, I think that the discussions around climate change and resiliency are changing. People are talking about it because they have to be talking about it. And that's leading to changes in the discussion amongst the state and federal officials as well. So Miami-Dade County is doing a great job with their resiliency office and their chief bay officer and chief heat officer. And the smaller municipalities are making those changes as well. We're seeing sustainability and resiliency task force pop up all over the place. And in the village of El Portal, we just started one last year. And I was fortunate enough to be appointed the chair of that. And Miami Shores to our north has a new task force, and Biscayne Park has a new task force. So the community is changing. Climate change is no longer as taboo as it was, especially from a government perspective. But we're happy to see the changes, but unfortunately the government measures that have been implemented so far are not enough to keep up with how quickly our environment is changing as a result of climate change.
Elizabeth, what are some of the main issues the Everglades Law Center is working on?
Sure. So we like to keep busy at the Everglades Law Center. Of course, we're working on Everglades restoration. And for those who aren't familiar, the Everglades ecosystem is not just Everglades National Park. The Everglades is from basically north of Lake Okeechobee all the way down to the Keys. And so we focus on implementing the comprehensive Everglades restoration plan, working with local governments and community partners to implement that plan. And that is a 20-year, well, we're 20 years into the plan. It's the biggest environmental restoration project in the country. And it has 68 individual projects. So we keep our hands busy with that. We also are involved with the update of the Lake Okeechobee System Operating Manual, which is referred to as LOSUM. Environmentalists love their acronyms. And LOSUM is basically the set of regulations that decides when and where water leaving Lake Okeechobee goes. So whether it goes to Miami-Dade County, whether it goes to the Everglades, or whether it gets discharged to the Indian River Lagoon or the Caloosahatchee, which, as we know, causes all kinds of problems. And so this work's really important because it sets the bar for where and when water will move in our state. We're also working on some water quality issues, especially focusing on stormwater. So we've been looking at the stormwater regulations throughout the state, but especially in Miami-Dade County, the permitting requirements. And we're also working on smart growth projects. So making sure that the urban development boundaries within our municipalities are staying. We're currently involved in pushing back on the potential development of a highway in the Everglades, which would increase urban sprawl, impact our groundwater, impact our ability to adapt to climate change, and also development in submerged lands where we have seagrasses. So we've kind of got our hands in a little bit of everything in South Florida.
Elizabeth, what legal challenges are individuals and communities facing due to climate change and sea level rise?
So that's a great question. Climate change is really bringing a whole new category of legal challenges and legal issues that have never really come up before, as we're dealing with flooding and septic tank failures and things like that. So we're really working to make sure that this new wave of legal standards that have to be developed properly protect our communities and our environment and appropriately tailored to the realistic future that we're experiencing with climate change. And that kind of, we're seeing this new wave of legal standards in a lot of different areas. Regulatory environmental laws are having to change to adapt to resiliency and mitigation. And stormwater, for example, a big challenge we have with stormwater is that the stormwater requirements for municipalities are not strong enough. Even municipalities that are perfectly complying with those are discharging polluted water to the bay and killing the bay. So, we need to strengthen those permits. We need to strengthen our environmental protections, and those are kind of constant battles we're having. We're also seeing issues with preemption. The state of Florida is preempting a lot of local regulatory measures that municipalities are trying to take to protect the environment. I think the one that people are more familiar with is this plastic straw ban or the plastic bag ban, where the state government said, no, you're not allowed to ban those things. But we also have some real concerns about bans that may have further reaching implications, like banning resiliency measures or banning local governments, or preempting, I should say, preempting local governments from passing laws that mitigate our carbon emissions or protect our wetlands or urban development. So while right now we're kind of dealing with the plastic bag straw issue, which is also important, there's some real concern that there'll be preemption on really meaningful issues that will allow us to adapt to climate change and mitigate climate change. And then, of course, causation issues with environmental disasters that we've never seen before. Who's responsible when the bay dies? Who's responsible when septic tanks can't be converted and they're polluting our waterways? And with that, we have some issues, but we have laws that require people to convert septic tanks to municipal sewer if they're able, but they can't afford it. So we have issues where equity and law conflict, and we have to adapt to those. So it's a compound question, because it's we're just seeing an entirely new area of the law develop, and so we're trying to be there and make sure they develop the way that we want them to.
Elizabeth, what can the Florida legislature do to help?
Another great question. They can pass stronger environmental laws, and to the last point, they can stop preempting local governments from trying to protect their own environments and to protect the interests of their residents. They can continue and increase funding for resiliency efforts. I know we're starting to see some funding come out of there, but it's not enough and it's not fast enough. We're trying to react to this after it's already happened. So we need to get out ahead of that. The legislature could fund the Everglades so we can move faster and get it restored, now. All of these things are really important, and we are getting some funding down, but we always need more. We could always have, the legislature could always help us out with some stronger growth management policies, and really just generally more bipartisan support for environmental issues. Kevin, as we know, the entire economy of Florida, our lifestyles, everything that we do depends on the environment. Our ability to keep living here depends on the environment. And it really should not be a partisan issue about the importance of protecting that environment, and our ability to live here should not be a partisan issue. So if we could get people a little bit more on board and realize how important these things are, that would be very helpful.
So, Elizabeth, how can Florida residents advocate for conservation and sustainability in their own communities?
That's such an important question. And I know it sounds a little cliche, but, get involved, reach out to your local representatives. And I'll elaborate on that a little bit, because I think that that's something that you hear a lot, reach out to your representatives, but sometimes it can feel like you're not really making a difference, or it's not changing the needle, moving the needle at all. But in mid-sized and small municipalities, there's a lot of space for resident involvement. Simply looking at what your local village council or city council is doing, look at the agenda for that month's meeting and see if there's anything on there that deals with resiliency or mitigation, and go to the meeting and listen to what they have to say and stand up and speak and tell them that those issues are important to you. So it can be something as simple as that, that I'm a resident here and I care about these issues and I want you as my elected officials to be focusing on that. So it doesn't have to be calling, your US senator or US representative. It's about participating in your local community. And there really is more space, I think, than most people realize. And I know I mentioned at the beginning of our discussion about the local task force. If most of, I wouldn't say most, but a lot of municipalities in Miami-Dade County have a task force that deals with sustainability and resiliency. And it's made up of residents in the community, not elected officials. And the residents, I'll use El Portal as an example. Our task force is fantastic and is made up of a number of members who their day jobs have nothing to do with the environment, are architects and teachers. And so these task forces are a great opportunity for people with a lot of diverse perspectives and life experiences to come together and talk about the issues that matter to them, and tell their governments what they want to see, rather than having it from the top down government perspective where likely the person in that position was hired because they already had experience in that position. So task forces are a great place to have those diverse perspectives and come up with unique ways of addressing issues, and sharing those needs and wants with your local governments. And advocate for the Everglades. As I mentioned, the Everglades is a huge system. And it's not just about preserving a park so that we can enjoy it and go for walks, but the Everglades system is absolutely vital for our ability to live in South Florida. It refills our drinking water, it cleans our drinking water, it keeps salt water out, it mitigates climate change. And so, Everglades restoration is not a faraway issue. It's an issue that impacts everybody living in Miami-Dade County. And in Miami-Dade County, I just wanted to mention an Everglades restoration project that's happening there as well, called the Biscayne Bay Southeastern Everglades Restoration Project, BBCR. And that is focused on Miami-Dade County. And it's one of the first Everglades projects that's focused on climate change, where they're looking to use the Everglades Restoration Project to not only adapt to the impacts of climate change, making sure the project is considering those, but to fight climate change. So restoring the Everglades and advocating in your local community for that is also a really impactful way to make a difference.
Elizabeth, thank you for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me. Great talking to you.